Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you the most in-depth analysis of the daytime dramas you love. Today is a thrilling day to dive into the latest shocking developments. So let us explore the profound emotional landscapes and explosive confrontations that are currently reshaping the lives of our favorite characters. The atmosphere inside the grand venue was nothing short of electric, a glittering testament to the sheer willpower and creative ambition of Katie Logan Spencer and the formidable Bill Spencer. Their debut fashion collection had just been broadcasted live on towering billboards across the globe, painting the major cities of the world with the triumphant rebirth of the Logan brand. The champagne was flowing, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi were popping in a blinding rhythm, and the air was thick with the intoxicating scent of absolute victory. For Katie, this was meant to be the crowning achievement of her professional life, a moment where she finally stepped out of the shadows and claimed her rightful place at the pinnacle of the international fashion industry. She stood on the stage, radiating an aura of hard-won success, basking in the adoration of the elite crowd that had gathered to witness her ascent. The multi-million-dollar empire they were building seemed invincible, a fortress of silk, satin, and ruthless business acumen. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of this spectacular evening, a dark undercurrent of tension had been quietly brewing, threatening to shatter the illusion of perfection. Deep within her soul, Katie harbored a profound and inescapable anxiety regarding the origins of her newfound success. While Bill stood beside her, a pillar of unyielding confidence and predatory instinct, Katie could not entirely silence the whispering doubts that echoed in her mind. She knew the history, the promises made and broken, and the deep-seated resentments that had been festering within the Forster family regarding the use of Eric Forster's designs. Her heart, a fragile organ with a tragic and miraculous history, beat with a rapid, nervous rhythm against her ribs. This was the heart that her brother, Storm Logan, had sacrificed his life to give her a constant, physical reminder of the delicate line she walked between life and death. The stress of the impending legal threats, the looming shadow of Eric Forster's wrath, and the sheer magnitude of the event had already taken a silent toll on her physical well-being. Katie had always been a survivor, a woman who had fought her way back from the brink of the abyss more times than anyone could count. But the emotional weight of this particular triumph was immense, leaving her profoundly vulnerable. The joyous cacophony of the celebration was suddenly and violently punctured by the arrival of Steffy Forster Finnegan. The heavy double doors of the venue were thrown open with such force that they slammed against the walls, echoing like a gunshot through the cavernous hall. The music seemed to falter, the glittering crowd parting like the Red Sea as Steffi marched down the center aisle, her eyes blazing with an unholy, righteous fury. She was a woman possessed, a fiercely protective daughter, and an uncompromising executive who viewed the entire spectacle as a grotesque desecration of her grandfather's unparalleled legacy. The murmurs of the crowd morphed into a shocked silence, the flashing cameras pivoting instantly from the triumphant designers to the incoming storm. Steffi's presence commanded absolute attention, her posture rigid with indignation, her jaw set in a hard, unforgiving line. She did not merely walk onto the stage. She invaded it, bringing with her the full, devastating weight of the Forster family's outrage. Without a moment of hesitation, Steffi launched into a blistering verbal assault that echoed through the microphones and out into the stunned auditorium. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at Katie, her voice ringing with a venomous clarity that cut to the very bone. Steffi branded Katie a thief, a parasite who was incapable of achieving greatness on her own and had instead resorted to stealing the genius of Eric Forster to build her counterfeit empire. The words were designed to humiliate, to strip away the glamour of the evening and expose what Steffi perceived as the ugly, undeniable truth. She railed against the audacity of the Logan brand, painting Bill and Katie as ruthless scavengers picking at the bones of Forster creations. Katie stood frozen, the color draining rapidly from her face as the barrage of insults washed over her. She tried to formulate a defense, to articulate the complex web of promises and betrayals that had led to this moment, but the sheer ferocity of Steffy's attack left her entirely breathless and exposed. The verbal altercation reached a horrifying crescendo in a matter of seconds, the escalating tension snapping with a sudden, shocking violence. In a moment that would be forever burned into the retinas of everyone present, Steffy's fury boiled over the edge of rational control. With a swift, vicious motion, she raised her hand and delivered a devastating slap across Katie's face. The sharp, cracking sound of the impact echoed through the silent room, amplified by the stage microphones, sending a collective gasp rippling through the audience. The cameras flashed in a blinding frenzy, immortalizing the exact fraction of a second when the glittering facade of the fashion world was shattered by raw, physical aggression. Katie's head snapped to the side, the sheer force of the blow knocking her off balance. For a suspended moment, time seemed to stand completely still. The sheer audacity of the act, committed in front of the international press, was unfathomable, transforming a corporate dispute into a brutal public execution of Katie's dignity. The immediate aftermath of the slap was a terrifying descent into chaos. Katie staggered backward, her hand instinctively flying to her stinging cheek, but the physical pain of the blow was instantly eclipsed by a far more sinister and deadly crisis. A sudden, agonizing expression twisted her features, her eyes widening in sheer terror as a crushing pressure seized her chest. She gasped for air, her breath coming in ragged, desperate hitches that sounded unnervingly loud in the sudden hush of the room. The fragile heart that had sustained her through so many trials was suddenly failing under the immense, unbearable weight of the shock and emotional trauma. Katie clutched her chest, her fingers digging into the expensive fabric of her designer gown as if trying to physically hold her failing heart together. Her knees buckled, the strength completely abandoning her body, and she collapsed onto the hard surface of the stage. The triumphant launch of the Logan brand had instantly transformed into a horrific, life-threatening tragedy. The sight of the woman he loved crumpling to the floor unleashed a primal, terrifying roar from deep within Bill Spencer's chest. The calculated, ruthless media mogul vanished in an instant, replaced by a desperate, terrified man who was watching his entire world shatter before his eyes. He dropped to his knees beside Katie, his hands hovering over her trembling form, unsure of how to touch her without causing further harm. He screamed for an ambulance, his booming voice echoing with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed, yet laced with an agonizing helplessness. He gathered her upper body into his arms, cradling her head against his chest, begging her to hold on, to keep breathing. The cameras continued to flash, capturing the heartbreaking image of the powerful Bill Spencer reduced to tears, his tailored suit wrinkling against the floor as he fought a desperate, losing battle against the fragile mortality of the woman he cherished above all else. A few feet away, Steffy Forrester Finnegan stood absolutely frozen, anchored to the spot by a sudden, paralyzing wave of horror. The righteous fury that had propelled her onto the stage and fueled her devastating attack evaporated in a single, terrifying heartbeat. She stared down at her own trembling hand, the hand that had delivered the blow, as if it belonged to a stranger. The realization of what she had just triggered crashed into her with the force of a freight train. She knew, perhaps better than anyone outside of the Logan family, the extensive and perilous history of Katie's heart condition. The accusation of theft and the defense of her grandfather's legacy suddenly seemed utterly meaningless in the face of the life-or-death crisis playing out at her feet. Steffy's breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide with a dawning, unbearable guilt. She had intended to humiliate a rival, to defend her family's honor, but in her unchecked rage, she had potentially become a murderer. The transition from the glamorous fashion venue to the sterile, unforgiving environment of the intensive care unit was a jarring, nightmarish blur. The vibrant colors of the runway were replaced by the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the hospital corridors, the pulsating music substituted by the rhythmic, terrifying beeping of life support machines. Katie lay in a hospital bed, her skin frighteningly pale, a complex network of tubes and wires connecting her fragile body to the monitors that were currently sustaining her existence. The doctors moved with a grim, urgent efficiency, their faces tight with concern as they battled to stabilize a heart that had been pushed far beyond its breaking point. The atmosphere in the ICU was suffocating, thick with the scent of antiseptic and the unspoken fear that this time, Katie might not possess the strength to fight her way back. Her life hung in the balance, a delicate thread that could snap at any given moment, leaving behind a wake of unimaginable grief. Outside the glass walls of the ICU, Bill Spencer paced the waiting room like a caged, wounded predator. The fear that had consumed him on the stage was rapidly mutating into a cold, terrifying, and absolute rage. The relentless titan of industry was resurrected with a vengeance, his sights locked entirely on the woman responsible for putting Katie in that hospital bed. He vowed to use every ounce of his immense wealth, every connection in his vast media empire, and every legal maneuver at his disposal to completely and utterly destroy Steffy Forrester. This was no longer a corporate dispute over fashion designs. This was a blood feud, a quest for absolute retribution. Bill publicly and vehemently accused Steffy of attempted murder, arguing with terrifying conviction that her actions were not a momentary lapse of judgment, but a calculated, lethal assault given her full knowledge of Katie's precarious medical history. Bill's retaliation was swift, methodical, and overwhelmingly powerful. He immediately deployed his army of lawyers and security personnel to confiscate and secure every single angle of security camera footage from the event venue. He wanted the slap, the collapse, and Steffy's reaction documented, verified, and prepared for presentation in a court of law. Furthermore, he unleashed the full, devastating power of Spencer Publications, directing his myriad of media outlets to flood the airwaves and the internet with the horrifying narrative of the Forrester heiress brutally attacking a defenseless woman. The relentless legal and media attack was designed to suffocate the Forrester family, to force them onto the defensive, and to ensure that the police and the district attorney had no choice but to pursue criminal charges. Bill was building an inescapable fortress of evidence, determined to see Steffy behind bars. Across the city, Ridge Forrester was thrust into the agonizing position of defending his daughter against the overwhelming, destructive force of Bill Spencer's wrath. The news of the altercation and Katie's subsequent collapse had hit Ridge like a physical blow, shattering the already fragile peace between the two warring families. While he was deeply horrified by Katie's medical crisis and profoundly disappointed by Steffy's violent loss of control, his paternal instincts overrode all other considerations. Ridge immediately mobilized the formidable Forrester legal team, preparing for the inevitable, brutal war that was about to erupt. He argued desperately that the slap, while deeply regrettable, was a crime of passion, a momentary explosion of stress and anger, and certainly not a premeditated attempt on Katie's life. The battle lines were explicitly drawn, the fashion industry's two most powerful dynasties preparing to engage in a conflict that threatened to leave nothing but scorched earth. Caught in the absolute, devastating epicenter of this escalating war was Brooke Logan Forrester. The tragedy had ripped her world apart, placing her at a horrifying, impossible crossroads that threatened to tear her very soul in two. On one side was Katie, her beloved younger sister, the woman whose fragile heart was currently failing in a sterile hospital room. Brooke's protective instincts toward her sister were fierce and deeply ingrained, fueled by a lifetime of shared traumas and profound love. On the other side was Ridge, the absolute love of her life, and Steffy, the stepdaughter she had helped raise and who was now facing the terrifying prospect of criminal prosecution and public ruin. Brooke was paralyzed by the agonizing duality of her loyalties, trapped in a nightmare where supporting one side meant entirely betraying the other. The psychological warfare raging within Brooke's mind was incredibly complex, rooted in decades of complicated family dynamics, betrayals, and fragile reconciliations. She found herself pacing the hospital corridors, her mind obsessively replaying the horrific footage of the slap that was now looping endlessly on every news channel. The anger she felt towards Steffy was visceral, a hot, burning resentment that the young woman could be so incredibly reckless, so blinded by her own self-righteous fury that she would physically attack someone with a transplanted heart. Yet, when she looked into Ridge's eyes, she saw the sheer, unadulterated terror of a father who was watching his daughter's life unravel. She was trapped in a no-win scenario, knowing that any decision she made, any side she chose to explicitly support, would result in the permanent destruction of a relationship she cherished. Ultimately, the tragedy at the Logan brand launch was a stark reminder that in the high-stakes world of fashion and corporate warfare, the most devastating casualties are rarely financial. They are deeply personal, measured in failing hearts, shattered families, and the agonizing guilt of actions that can never be undone. As Katie Logan Spencer fought her silent, desperate battle for survival in the intensive care unit, the empires of Spencer and Forrester braced for an impact that would undoubtedly change the landscape of their lives forever. The glittering billboards that had broadcasted their triumph now felt like mocking monuments to their hubris, a testament to the terrifying speed with which a moment of absolute victory can be transformed into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. The only certainty in the days to come was that the fallout from Steffy's devastating loss of control would echo through the halls of Forrester Creative.